This is Dan York, and I'm here today with Martin Murray, who is the primary spokesperson for the Public Service of New Hampshire, PSNH, our primary electric utility up here. And so welcome to the show, Martin.
Thanks, Dan.
So we had an ice storm up here.
Yeah, we sure did.
So you were using some social media tools in part of this. Can you talk
we did.
a little bit about what it was all about?
Sure. We had about 2/3 of our customers without power after an ice storm on December 11th and 12th. What we did in the wake of this storm was something we had never done before. Besides just answering the phone, talking to reporters, and putting material up on our website, we used Twitter, we used YouTube, we set up a Flickr site. We used a lot of social media tools that we had never used ourselves to engage in a conversation with the media and with our customers directly, to try to provide them with really good information about what was going on.
Now, how did you find it worked for you?
It worked really well. We had an amazing increase, for example, in the number of Twitter followers. We had set up Twitter about half a year before, and basically had about 100 followers, and we now have 1,900 followers. And those 1,800 that we've gotten in the last 2 weeks are incredibly engaged. These are all people who have a real reason for wanting to follow us and for engaging us in the conversation. So the Twitter tool in particular was very effective in this crisis in helping us to communicate with our customers.
Now, with people without power, how were they getting to these tools?
Yeah, it's a lot of people say, how could they do that? Most people were doing it as the way you might imagine. They had cell phones, and they were following our Twitter posts on their cell phones, either from their home where they had no power, or they would go off to a coffee shop or to a friend's house, and they would charge up the batteries, and they would follow us on Twitter, and many of them would engage us in the conversation. They would ask us direct questions or post a comment, and they had no trouble at all in finding us via Twitter.
Now, you yourself had no power for part of this too, huh?
I had no power for a week, and I was in the unfortunate, or maybe fortunate position of being in a dead zone. So I actually could not even make a cell call from my home. I used it basically as a place to sleep and to keep the pipes from freezing. But as soon as I left that area and got back on the road, wherever I was, or at the headquarters, I was able to get back on Twitter through the cell phone or through my laptop and start engaging in the conversation again, and it was very effective.
What was the response from users or from the customers out there to your presence there on Twitter and the tools you were using?
Well, I would say it was very positive overall. People used Twitter to say whatever they wanted to, but we had a lot of comments from people, basically, even if they were angry for not having power, they thanked us for having that means for them to communicate with us. We also got some notoriety in the media, people the reporters discovering that we had this tool, recognizing that it was something new, and actually writing a couple of news articles about it. And of course that helped to drive more people to the site.
You also were putting up videos through YouTube and driving people there again through Twitter, it seems.
Yeah, we created videos. We actually have a relationship with a professional videographer, and we went out in the field, our president went out in the field to show what the conditions were and to bring our story proactively to our customers. But then we would link to YouTube on our website and directly from Twitter. So if people were following it on Twitter, they actually found a way then to view the YouTube videos. And again, I think overall it was a positive thing. It showed that we were out there in the field. It helped us by providing a real look at some of the conditions that we were grappling with, and it helped people to understand why it took as long as it did for us to fix the problem and for them to get their power back.
Oh, I see. If you were showing videos or photos, you could certainly show people why they're having the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the issue as we got into the second week of some people without power, were people saying, I can't understand this. This is 2008. Why don't I have my lights on? And we had to be able to effectively tell that story about why in some cases it wasn't as simple as just throwing a switch. So we were able to do that through photos and through video.
Now, you folks are obviously the power side of things, but for people with internet access or cable, all of those wires are on the same poles. How does that interaction work?
Well, if you look at a standard pole, you'll notice that the telephone lines and the cable lines are below the power lines, That helps protect them to a certain extent. But basically, we're dealing with electrical energy at a high voltage. If something touches our line, it can short it out very easily. Whereas if you're talking about a telephone line, which has a small amount of current, or a cable line, you almost have to have a physical breakage before you lose that connection. So unless the equipment is completely damaged or destroyed, or unless the line is broken, you may have your telephone service or your internet service even if the cable is on the ground.
Sure. Were you liaisoning with these other agencies or other companies throughout this?
Well, we did have to liaison with them. In many cases, people don't realize that we don't own all the utility poles. We own maybe half of them, but half of them are actually owned by the telephone utility too. So when a pole is destroyed, it's not the power company that always has to replace it. Sometimes it's not our property. The telephone company has to come out.
Oh, really?
So that takes some cooperation. And during a storm of this magnitude, it's good to have that level of cooperation in order to get people's power back on quickly.
Interesting. Well, so now this ice storm is behind us. Hopefully we don't have another one like this soon, but you've obviously learned some good lessons for using social media in a natural disaster type of environment. What would you do differently or better next time? Or?
I've been thinking about that, and I think the next logical step would be to not limit it to the communications department, but also take it to the customer service level. We have 100 or more customer service representatives who are answering the phone, talking to people. It might be the right time to begin to introduce the concept of maybe one or two of those reps having the Twitter access, for example, or access to other social media tools, because they're there 24/7. I'm not always there, and right now it's a small man operation, and I think we have to broaden the landscape here a little bit and talk about the possibility of the company providing the kind of information that we can already on the telephone and using some of these other tools so that they're available to our constituents at any time, day or night. So that may be the next conversation we have internally.
Great. Anything that really surprised you during the time that you used all this?
Well, I think the thing that surprised me, I guess, was perhaps the most obvious, and I had to experience it really to understand it. And that was the fact that what Twitter allowed us to do was to engage in what normally would be a two-way conversation between me and you on the telephone was suddenly a much broader conversation. I was having a conversation with you that if we chose, we could make it available to everybody that's following us on Twitter. It's stating the obvious perhaps, but it was eye-opening because it showed me that if we have a good, positive conversation, even if your lights still aren't on, for everyone to experience that conversation to understand it is actually a really good thing. And that's the one of the important positives about the new social media tools like Twitter.
Great. Well, thank you, Martin, for your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. I've been speaking with Martin Murray, who is the primary spokesperson for Public Service in New Hampshire, and you can find him at
psnhnews.com or twitter.com/psnh.
All right. Thanks for your time.